Welcome to Chapter 12 of Sherlock Holmes, The Case of the Silent Sovereign, a 12-part Sherlock Holmes mystery. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story unfold. If you missed the previous chapter, please visit to my channel and enjoy the journey of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 12, The Unwritten Chapter. The aftermath of Lord Harrington's arrest was a flurry of official activity. Scotland Yard was triumphant. The newspapers were filled with sensational headlines, and the name of Sherlock Holmes was, for a brief and fleeting moment, on the lips of every man and woman in London. But my friend, as always, had no interest in the public accolades. As soon as the last statement had been given and the last piece of evidence catalogued, he retreated to the familiar, comforting clutter of our Baker Street lodgings. A week later, the city had moved on to a new sensation, and our lives had returned to their usual, quiet rhythm. We sat by the fire, the rain lashing against the windows, the world outside a blur of grey and brown. The silence in the room was a comfortable one, the silence of two old friends who have no need for words. I had been reading the evening paper, which was filled with the latest developments in the Harrington case. The trial was set to be the sensation of the season, a grand piece of legal theatre that would expose the dark underbelly of the British establishment. "It says here," I said, looking up from my paper, "that the government has issued a statement denying any knowledge of Harrington's activities. They are calling him a rogue agent, a fanatic whose patriotism curdled into treason." Holmes, who had been staring into the flames, a thoughtful expression on his face, gave a short, cynical laugh. "They are protecting themselves, Watson, as all governments do. They are cutting their losses, distancing themselves from a venture that has failed. Had Harrington succeeded, he would have been hailed as a hero. But failure in the world of power is an orphan." He fell silent again, his mood one of profound, almost melancholic contemplation. The case had affected him more deeply than I had realized. He had not just solved the crime. He had looked into the abyss, into the dark heart of human ambition, and the sight had left its mark on him. "What will become of the weapon, Holmes?" I asked, my voice low. "The plans, the research, what will happen to it all?" He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a deep and weary sadness. "It is the most dangerous piece of knowledge that has ever been conceived by the mind of man, Watson, and it cannot be allowed to exist in this world." He rose from his chair and walked to his chemical workbench. From a locked drawer, he removed a small, leather-bound journal. It was the last, and most important, of Lord Finch's notebooks, the one that contained the final, crucial details of his terrible discovery. He held it in his hands for a long moment, as if weighing the fate of the world. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he tossed it into the heart of the fire. I watched, mesmerized, as the flames licked at the leather cover, as the pages curled and blackened, as the ink that held the secrets of the silent sovereign turned to ash and smoke. It was a profound and symbolic act, a final, desperate attempt to put the genie back in the bottle. "I have taken the liberty," Holmes said, his voice a low murmur, "of ensuring that all of Lord Finch's other notes and prototypes have met a similar fate. I have used the authority of the Crown, an authority that Lestrade was only too happy to grant me in the wake of his success, to ensure that every last trace of this terrible knowledge has been expunged from the record. He returned to his chair, a great weariness in his movements. Some knowledge, Watson, is too perilous for mankind. Some doors are best left unopened. The world is not ready for the sound of silence, and I pray that it never will be. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the last of the journal burn away. The fire, which had been our constant companion throughout this dark and complex case, was now a funeral pyre, consuming the last remnants of a dream that had become a nightmare. Finally, Holmes looked at me, a rare, almost gentle smile on his lips. "Well, Watson," he said, his voice lighter now, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. "The case of the silent sovereign is at an end, and I must confess I am in need of a new distraction. Is there anything of interest in the papers?" I picked up the paper, my heart filled with a profound sense of relief and admiration for my friend. He had not just solved a crime. He had saved the world from a terrible and unseen danger. He had made a choice to value wisdom over knowledge, to value humanity over power. I took to my desk, the familiar weight of my pen in my hand, and began to write. I knew that the full story of the silent sovereign, the story of the government conspiracy and the destruction of Finch's research could never be told. It was a chapter that must remain unwritten, a secret that must be kept for the good of all. But I could tell the story of the locked room, of the mark of the empty crown, of the brilliant, flawed men of the Royal Society. I could tell the story of a case that had tested my friend's powers to their very limit, a case that had taken us from the highest echelons of society to the darkest corners of the human soul. As I wrote, I looked over at my friend. He was leaning back in his armchair, his eyes closed, his long fingers steepled before him. He was at peace, his mind at rest, the storm of the case having finally passed. The firelight cast a warm glow on his sharp, intelligent features, and in that moment he seemed to be the very embodiment of reason and justice in a world that was so often devoid of both. The case of the silent sovereign was over. But the partnership of Holmes and Watson, the endless, fascinating adventure of life in our Baker Street lodgings, that was a story that would never end. And I, John H. Watson, M.D., would be there to chronicle every last extraordinary chapter. Thank you for listening to Chapter 12 of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Silent Sovereign. If you enjoyed the mystery and want more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with fellow mystery lovers. Your support helps keep the stories alive. See you in the next story.